The great chamber of the Galactic Council was silent. 12,000 representatives from across the known galaxy sat in their assigned seats, waiting for the final vote. The chamber itself was enormous, built inside a space station that floated at the exact center of civilized space. Light from 1,000 different stars filtered through the transparent walls, creating patterns on the floor that shifted and changed with each passing hour. High Arbiter Vexthon stood at the central platform. He was old, even by the standards of his species, and he had served on the council for nearly 400 years. In all that time, he had never seen the chamber so tense. He raised his four-jointed arm, and the last whispers died away. "The motion before us today concerns the species known as humans," he announced. His natural voice was a series of clicks and whistles, but the translation device around his neck converted his words into standard galactic speech. After 3 cycles of debate, the Council will now vote on Resolution 7742, the Declaration of Containment. In the human section of the gallery, Commander Lisa Grant watched the proceedings with a heavy heart. She was 43 years old, with short brown hair and tired eyes. For 3 years, she had served as the senior human diplomat to the Galactic Council. For 3 years, she had tried to convince the elder races that humanity was not a threat. She had failed her first officer. Kevin Park stood beside her. He was younger than Lisa by almost a decade, with a calm face that rarely showed emotion. But even he could not hide his worry as the voting began. "How bad is it going to be?" he asked quietly. Lisa did not answer. She already knew the result. The votes had been counted behind closed doors long before this public session. This was just ceremony, a formal announcement of what had already been decided. One by one, the major powers cast their votes. The Methane Collective voted yes. The Silicon Mines voted yes. The Hegemony, the largest military power in the galaxy, voted yes with enthusiasm. The Crystalline Federation abstained, which was as close to support as humanity could hope for. When the counting was finished, High Arbiter Vexthon spoke again. "The motion carries by a margin of 7,412 to 4,193, with 607 abstentions. Resolution 7742 is hereby adopted." A wave of sound passed through the chamber. Some species cheered. Others clicked or hummed in their own ways of expressing approval. A few remained silent, watching the human delegation with something that might have been pity. From this moment forward, Vexthon continued, "The species known as humanity is declared a threat to galactic stability. All member species of this council are forbidden from engaging in contact, trade, or diplomatic relations with Earth or any of its colony worlds. Human expansion beyond their current borders is prohibited. Any violation of this resolution will be met with enforcement action." Lisa felt Kevin's hand on her arm. "Commander, we should go." She nodded slowly. There is nothing more to be done here. The council had made its decision, and humanity would have to live with the consequences as they walked toward the exit. Ambassador Zero Soul of the Methane Collective intercepted them. She was a tall being, nearly 3 meters in height, with pale blue skin and large black eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Commander Grant," she said, her translator giving her voice a musical quality, "I want you to know that this was not personal. The Council acts in the interest of galactic peace." Lisa stopped and turned to face her. "Ambassador, my species has been in contact with yours for exactly 40 years. In that time, we have started no wars. We have attacked no one. We have done nothing except explore, trade, and build colonies on worlds that no one else wanted." "That is precisely the problem," Zero Soul replied. "You spread too quickly. You adapt too easily. In 40 years, you have established 17 colony worlds. The Methane Collective took 2,000 years to establish the same number, and that makes us a threat?" Zero Soul's large eyes blinked slowly. "It makes you unpredictable. The elder races have maintained peace for 12,000 years by moving slowly, by thinking carefully, by avoiding rapid change. Your species does not understand this. You rush forward without considering the consequences." Lisa wanted to argue, but she knew it would be pointless. The council had already made up its mind. Humanity was too different, too strange, too fast, and now they would be contained like a disease. I understand, Lisa said finally. But I want you to remember this conversation, Ambassador. Remember that we came here in peace. Remember that we tried to be good neighbors. And remember that when you decided to treat us as enemies, we had done nothing to deserve it. She turned and walked away, leaving Zero Soul standing alone in the corridor, back on the human diplomatic vessel Endeavor. Lisa gathered her senior staff in the conference room. The ship was small compared to the massive vessels of the elder races, but it was fast and well-equipped. It had been Lisa's home for 3 years, and she knew every corner of it. You all know what happened, she began. The Council has voted to outlaw humanity. Starting immediately, we are to be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. What does that mean for us? Asked Lieutenant Amy Chen, the ship's communications officer. She was young, barely 25, and this was her first deep space assignment. It means we go home, Lisa replied. We report to Admiral Cole and the United Earth Assembly, and then we figure out what comes next. Kevin spoke up. The Council has enforcement fleets. The hegemony alone has over 10,000 warships. If they decide to actually enforce this resolution, we cannot stop them. No, we cannot, Lisa agreed. Not in a direct fight. But humanity has never won by fighting directly against stronger enemies. We win by being smarter, faster, and more adaptable. She activated the holographic display at the center of the table. A map of the galaxy appeared, with human territory marked in blue. It was a tiny patch compared to the vast empires of the elder races. The Council thinks they can contain us, Lisa said. They think that by cutting us off from trade and diplomatic support, they can force us to stay in our little corner of the galaxy. But they do not understand what they are dealing with. What do you mean? Amy asked. Lisa smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The Council has been watching our official colonies, our registered ships, our formal trade agreements. They have been counting our military vessels and measuring our industrial output. But they have not been paying attention to everything else. She touched a control and new markers appeared on the map. Hundreds of them, scattered across regions that the Council considered empty or worthless. What are those? Kevin asked, leaning forward. Those are the places where humans have already been living for years. Small settlements, research stations, mining operations, communities that we never reported to the Council because they never asked. Lisa looked around the table at her officers. The Council voted to outlaw humanity, but they were already 47 hours too late. By the time they made their decision, we had already spread further than they could possibly imagine. She shut off the display and stood. Get us underway to Earth. We have a lot of work to do. 6 months before the Galactic Council cast its vote, on a frozen moon that orbited a dying star, a young engineer named Danny Reyes was about to change everything. The moon was called Kepler 7b, and it was one of the most unpleasant places in the galaxy. The surface temperature never rose above -100 degrees. The atmosphere was a toxic mix of methane and ammonia. The only reason anyone lived there at all was because the rocks beneath the ice contained rare minerals that were valuable for trade with the elder races Danny had been on. Kepler 7b for 2 years. He was 28 years old, with dark hair and a quick smile that came easily, despite the harsh conditions. His official job was to maintain the mining equipment. His unofficial job was something far more important. Maria, he called out, his voice echoing through the small laboratory. You need to see this. Maria Santos pushed herself up from her workstation. She was the colony's chief scientist. A woman in her early 40s with gray streaks in her black hair and a permanent expression of mild skepticism. She floated over to Danny's console in the low gravity and looked at the data on his screen. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she spoke a single word. Impossible. That is what I thought too, Danny replied, grinning. But I have run the test 17 times. The results are the same every time. What Danny had created was a new way to generate energy. The device was small, no bigger than a shoebox, but it produced more power than the colony's entire main reactor. And it did so without fuel, without waste, without any of the materials that the elder races controlled. If this works on a larger scale, Maria said slowly, it changes everything. I know. The elder races had maintained their power over younger species for thousands of years through control of resources, the crystals needed for faster-than-light travel, the elements required for advanced computing, the fuel sources that powered entire civilizations. Without access to these resources, no species could challenge the established order. But Danny's device did not need any of those things. It drew energy directly from the fabric of space itself, from the tiny fluctuations that existed at the quantum level. It was free. It was unlimited. And most importantly, it was something that humanity had developed on its own. We need to be careful with this, Maria warned. If the Council finds out what we have done, they will come for us. The Council is already coming for us, Danny pointed out. Everyone knows the vote is going to happen. It is only a matter of time before they try to contain humanity completely. At least this gives us a chance to survive on our own. Maria nodded slowly. She understood the logic even if it frightened her. What do you want to do? I want to share this with everyone. Every human colony, every research station, every ship. I want to make sure that even if Earth falls, even if the Council destroys everything we have built officially, this technology will survive. And so they began. Using communication channels that the Galactic Council did not know existed, Denny and Maria sent the specifications for the new energy device to scientists across human space. Within weeks, engineers on dozens of worlds were building their own versions. Within months, the technology had spread to hundreds of locations. Meanwhile, on Earth, a different kind of preparation was taking place. Admiral Sophie Cole stood before a classified session of the United Earth Assembly. She was 62 years old, with silver hair cut short and a face that showed the weight of decades of service. Behind her, holographic displays showed the current state of human territory and the military forces arrayed against them. The situation is simple, she said, her voice calm and clear. The Galactic Council is going to vote to outlaw us. Our intelligence assets have confirmed this beyond any doubt. The question we must answer today is what we are going to do about it. A senator from the European Federation raised his hand. Admiral, what options do we have? The Council's combined military forces outnumber ours by a factor of at least 100 to 1. That is correct, Senator. In a direct military confrontation, we would lose. Quickly and decisively. Sophie touched a control, and the display changed. Which is why we are not going to fight directly. The new image showed a complex network of connections spanning dozens of star systems. Each node represented a human settlement, but these were not the official colonies that appeared in Council records. For the past decade, we have been quietly establishing communities throughout the galaxy, Sophie explained. Small groups of civilians, families, professionals, people with the skills needed to build and survive on their own. We call it Project Dandelion. Like the flower, another senator observed, when you blow on it, the seeds scatter everywhere. Exactly. The Council thinks of humanity as a single tree that they can cut down. But we are not a tree. We are dandelion seeds already carried by the wind to every corner of the galaxy. A murmur passed through the assembly. Sophie continued. There are currently 412 separate settlements established under this project. Approximately 2 million people total. They are located in regions that the Council considers too remote, too poor in resources, or too dangerous to bother with. The elder races will never find them all. And what about Earth? A senator asked. What about our official colonies? Sophie's expression grew serious. We will defend them as best we can. We have been developing new weapons, new tactics, new technologies that the elder races do not know about. But I will not lie to you. Some of our worlds will fall. Some of our people will die. The Council has decided to make us their enemy, and enemies suffer in war. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we will survive. That is what Project Dandelion guarantees. No matter what the Council does to us, no matter how many ships they send, no matter how many worlds they take, humanity will continue. We will spread. We will grow. And someday, we will show this galaxy what a Terrible mistake they made when they decided to fear us instead of welcoming us as friends. The assembly voted that night to fully fund Project Dandelion and to begin preparing all human worlds for the coming storm. They knew that dark days were ahead, but they also knew that darkness never lasted forever. On Kepler 7b, Danny Reyes received word of the assembly's decision. He looked out the window of his small quarters at the frozen landscape beyond, at the stars that shone through the thin atmosphere. They think they can contain us, he said to himself. They have no idea who they are dealing with. Turned back to his work. There was still so much to do, so many improvements to make to his energy device. Every advance he made was one more step toward freedom. One more tool that humanity could use to survive and thrive despite the Council's hatred. The seeds had been planted. Now it was time to watch them grow. 3 weeks after the Galactic Council voted to outlaw humanity, the first enforcement fleet arrived at New Providence. New Providence was one of humanity's largest colony worlds. 800,000 people lived there, spread across 3 continents. They had farms and factories, schools and hospitals, everything needed for a civilization to thrive. The colonists had built their world from nothing over the course of 20 years, turning a barren rock into a place they were proud to call home. Now a fleet of alien warships hung in orbit above them. Blocking out the stars, Captain Nathan Torres stood on the bridge of the colony's defense station and watched the enemy vessels take position. He was 35 years old, with a soldier's build and a soldier's calm. He had known this day would come eventually. Every officer in the human military had known. They had prepared as best they could, but preparation and reality were 2 different things. They outnumber us 40-1, his tactical officer reported. Their weapons are more powerful than ours. Their shields are stronger. In a direct engagement, we would not last an hour. Lieutenant Nathan replied quietly. He did not take his eyes off the main display where the alien fleet was spreading into an attack formation. What about our ground defenses? All stations are active and ready. The civilian population has been moved to the shelters. We can hold out for a while, but eventually they will break through. Nathan nodded. The situation was exactly as bad as he had expected. But the human military had not spent the last decade preparing for a fight they could win. They had prepared for a fight they could survive. Are hailing us, the communications officer announced. Put it through. The face that appeared on screen belonged to Fleet Commander Vexel of the Hegemony. He was reptilian in appearance, with green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. His species was one of the oldest in the galaxy, and they had been conquering younger races for longer than humanity had existed. Human Commander Vexel said, his translated voice cold and formal. By order of the Galactic Council, this colony is to be evacuated. You have 72 hours to remove all human presence from this world. Failure to comply will result in enforcement action. This is not a negotiation. Transmission ended before Nathan could respond. He stood in silence for a moment, then turned to his bridge crew. You all heard him. 72 hours. He took a deep breath. Which means we have 72 hours to show them why that was a mistake. Activate Protocol Sunrise. Across New Providence, hidden systems began to come online. Defense platforms that had been disguised as weather satellites revealed their true nature. Ground-based installations that looked like mining equipment transformed into weapons emplacements. Underground bunkers that the Council did not know existed opened their doors to receive civilians, and in orbit. A dozen small human ships that had been hiding in the shadow of the planet's moon began to move. 72 hours passed. During that time, no human vessel left New Providence. No evacuation shuttle launched. The colonists stayed exactly where they were, deep in their shelters. Waiting for what was to come, Fleet Commander Vexel gave the order to advance. His ships moved toward the planet in perfect formation. They had done this 100 times before, against a dozen different species. The pattern was always the same. Overwhelming force, quick victory, minimal losses. Younger races simply could not match the technology and experience of the hegemony. The first warning that something was different came when 3 of his destroyers suddenly lost power. One moment they were functioning normally, the next their engines went dark, their weapons went offline, and they began to drift helplessly through space. What happened? Exile demanded, before anyone could answer. The human ships attacked. They came from multiple directions at once, moving faster than any vessel the hegemony had ever encountered. They did not engage in the formal, organized combat that the elder races practiced. Instead, they struck like predators, hitting weak points in the formation and then retreating before the larger ships could respond. Return fire, Exile commanded. His weapons officers tried, but the human ships were too quick. Every time a targeting solution was locked, the enemy vessel had already moved to a new position. Worse, the humans seemed to know exactly where the hegemony shields were weakest. Every shot they fired found its mark. The battle lasted 3 days. During that time, Fleet Commander Exile learned lessons that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He learned that humans did not fight fair. They used tricks and traps, hidden weapons and unexpected tactics. They attacked supply ships and communication relays instead of engaging the main fleet directly. They planted mines in places where no one would think to look. They even used their own damaged vessels as weapons. Aiming them at enemy ships and detonating their reactors at the last moment, he learned that humans did not give up. Even when they were outnumbered and outgunned, they kept fighting. When one ship was destroyed, another took its place. When a weapons system was damaged, the crew found a way to repair it or replaced it with something improvised. They fought with a desperation that the hegemony had never encountered before, and he learned that humans were willing to die for their homes. Not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. Every pilot, every soldier, every civilian who picked up a weapon did so knowing that they might not survive. They fought anyway. When the battle finally ended, Exile ordered his fleet to withdraw. He had lost nearly a third of his vessels. The humans had lost more, but New Providence remained in human hands. The colonists emerged from their shelters to find their sky clear of enemy ships. Captain Nathan Torres stood among the wreckage of his defense station and looked up at the stars. His uniform was torn and his face was marked with cuts and burns, but he was smiling. "They will be back," his lieutenant said, standing beside him. "They will bring more ships next time." "Probably," Nathan agreed. "But we showed them something today. We showed them that we are not just going to accept their verdict and disappear. We are going to fight for every world, every colony, every single person. And even if we lose in the end, we are going to make them pay a price they never expected." News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Other species, those who had long resented the power of the elder races but had never dared to challenge them, began to pay attention. Whispers started in the dark corners of space stations and on the hidden channels of the communication networks. The humans had stood up to the hegemony. The humans had fought back, and the humans were still standing. For the first time in thousands of years, the established order of the galaxy began to shake, Ambassador. Xerasol of the Methane Collective had been one of the loudest voices calling for action against humanity. She had argued in council sessions that the humans were too dangerous to be allowed to spread freely. She had voted yes on the resolution that outlawed them. She had believed, truly believed, that she was doing the right thing now, 6 months after that vote. She was beginning to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. The data on her screen was impossible to ignore. Human settlements were appearing faster than anyone could track them. New communities were being discovered almost daily in regions that the Council had considered empty or worthless. Worse still, these settlements were not struggling to survive. They were thriving. How were they doing this? She asked her aide, a young male of her species, who had been assigned to monitor human activity. "They have been cut off from all trade. They have no access to Council resources. They should be starving by now." "They are not starving," the aide replied carefully. "They have developed new technology. Energy systems that do not require our crystals. Manufacturing processes that do not need our materials. They are becoming self-sufficient." Xerasol felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of her office. The elder races had maintained their power for 12,000 years through control of essential resources. If the humans had found a way around that control, the implications were enormous. There is something else, the aide continued. The humans are not keeping this technology to themselves. They are sharing it. We have confirmed reports of human engineers providing assistance to communities of other species. Mining stations, agricultural colonies, even some worlds within Council territory. That is against the law. Yes, but the beings they are helping do not seem to care about the law. Sirasol dismissed her aide and sat alone in her office for a long time. Through the window, she could see the stars of the galaxy, the same stars that her species had watched for millions of years. Everything had seemed so stable, so permanent. Now it all felt like it was shifting beneath her feet. A few days later, she received a report that changed her understanding even further. The human merchant vessel had been captured near the border of collective space. This was not unusual. Many human ships had been seized since the Council's vote. What was unusual was the cargo that was found on board. It was not weapons. It was not technology. It was a cultural archive. Thousands upon thousands of files containing human history. Literature, art, philosophy, and more. Stories from every era of human civilization translated into dozens of galactic languages. Scientific papers and musical compositions, religious texts and children's tales. Everything that humanity had created over its short existence, gathered together and prepared for distribution. Sirasol spent 3 days reviewing the material. She read stories about humans who had overcome impossible odds. She studied their history of conflict and cooperation, of failure and recovery. She learned about their religions, their philosophies, their endless debates about the meaning of existence, and she discovered something that disturbed her more than any weapon could have. The humans had a concept they called hope. It was different from the calculated optimism that the elder races practiced. It was irrational, stubborn, and apparently indestructible. Humans carried it with them even in the darkest circumstances. They taught it to their children as naturally as they taught them to walk and speak. More importantly, they were teaching it to others. Sirasol began to investigate further. What she found shocked her. On a mining station in the outer reaches, a group of worker caste beings had begun reading human stories. These were people who had never known anything except labor and obedience. Their species had been serving the elder races for thousands of years, doing the dangerous and unpleasant work that no one else wanted to do. They had always accepted their place in the order of things. Now they were asking questions. They were wondering why their lives had to be this way. They were talking about something called freedom. On a dying world in the Helios cluster, a mixed community of 3 different species was working alongside human engineers to build infrastructure that would save millions of lives. The world had been abandoned by the Council centuries ago, deemed too expensive to save, but the humans had not accepted that verdict. They had come with their new technology and their strange determination, and they were fixing what the elder races had given up on a space station that served as a trading hub between several major powers. Young beings of a dozen species were gathering to discuss human ideas. They were reading human books, watching human entertainment, learning human languages. They were forming friendships across species lines that had never been crossed before. The Council had tried to outlaw humanity, but you could not outlaw an idea. Sirasol made a decision. She contacted Admiral Sophie Cole through back channels, using methods that the Council did not know she possessed. "We need to talk," her message said. "There are those of us who believe the Council has made a terrible mistake. Not because you are a threat to our power, but because you might be exactly what this galaxy needs." Sophie Cole received the message on Earth, in her office at military headquarters. She read it 3 times before responding. "I am listening," she wrote back. "What do you have in mind?" What followed was a series of secret communications that would eventually reshape galactic civilization. Sirasol was not alone in her doubts. Many members of the Council had begun to question the wisdom of trying to contain humanity. They had seen the reports from New Providence. They had heard the whispers about human technology spreading through the galaxy. They had noticed that species who had contact with humans seemed happier, more creative, more alive. A movement began to form in the shadows of galactic politics. It was small at first, just a handful of ambassadors and officials who dared to question the established order. But it grew quickly. It's fed by every story of human courage and every example of human generosity. The elder races had spent 12,000 years building a galaxy based on hierarchy and control. The humans were showing that another way was possible, and more beings were starting to listen. Danny Reyes, still working on his frozen moon, received word of these developments through the same hidden channels that had spread his energy technology. "They are actually changing their minds," Maria Santos said, reading the report over his shoulder. "Some of them, anyway." Danny smiled. "That is how it always works. You cannot force people to change. You can only show them a better way and hope they are wise enough to take it. And if they are not wise enough, then we keep trying. That is what humans do. We never give up." 1 year after the Galactic Council voted to outlaw humanity, the Council itself no longer existed. It did not end in fire and destruction, the way the elder races had always assumed galactic change must happen. There was no great war, no final battle, no moment of dramatic surrender. Instead, it ended in 1,000 small changes, in doors opened and hands extended. In ideas that spread faster than any fleet could travel. The Methane Collective was the first to withdraw from the Council. Ambassador Zirasol made the announcement herself. Standing before the same chamber where she had once voted to outlaw humanity, "We joined this council because we believed it represented the best path forward for all species," she said, her translated voice clear and steady. "We no longer believe that. The council has shown that it fears change more than it values justice. We cannot be part of such an institution." Within weeks, 3 more species followed, then 7 more, then dozens. The council tried to hold itself together through threats and promises, but nothing worked. The foundation had been broken, and no amount of repairs could save it. In its place, something new began to form. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered to discuss what should come next. For the first time in 12,000 years, younger species had a voice equal to the elder races. For the first time, beings who had never been allowed to speak were heard. The new organization was called the Galactic Assembly. It was built on principles that would have seemed impossible just a year before. Equal representation for all species, regardless of age or technological development. Decisions made by consensus rather than power. Resources shared freely instead of hoarded by the few. High Arbiter, Vexthon, the same official who had announced humanity's outlawing, presided over the first session of the new assembly. He was old and tired, but something had changed in him. The certainty that had guided him for 4 centuries was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like wonder. "The motion carries," he announced, his voice carrying through the great chamber. "The Charter of the Galactic Assembly is ratified. All species, regardless of their history, shall have equal standing in our shared future." In the observation gallery, Commander Lisa Grant watched with Kevin Park at her side. 3 years ago, she had stood in this same room and watched her species be condemned. Now she was watching the birth of something entirely new. "We did this," Kevin said quietly. "I still cannot quite believe it." Lisa shook her head. "We did not do this. We just showed them another way. They made their own choice." That was the truth that the elder races were only beginning to understand. Humanity had not conquered anyone. They had not forced a single species to change. All they had done was offer an alternative. A vision of what the galaxy could be if beings chose cooperation over domination. Hope over fear. Admiral Sophie Cole gave the closing address of the Assembly's first session. She stood at the central platform where so many important announcements had been made over the millennia, and she looked out at the thousands of representatives who had gathered to build a new future. "We came to the stars not as conquerors, but as neighbors," she said, her voice calm and clear. "We spread across the galaxy not because we wanted to dominate, but because it is simply what we do. We grow, we explore, we connect." The Council tried to contain us because they feared what we might become. They should have wondered instead what we might help them become. She paused, letting her words settle over the assembly. This is not the end of our story. It is not even the beginning. It is simply the moment when everyone else realized they were part of it too. The challenges ahead are enormous. There are still those who fear change, who long for the old ways. There will be setbacks and failures. But we have proven that progress is possible. We have shown that a galaxy built on cooperation is stronger than one built on control. Sophie stepped back from the platform, and the chamber erupted in sounds of approval from 100 different species. Some cheered. Some clicked or hummed or flashed colors that humans could not see. But all of them were celebrating the same thing: the birth of a new era. Outside the station, in the vast darkness between the stars, human ships traveled alongside alien vessels. On worlds throughout the galaxy, beings of different species worked together to build homes and grow food and raise families. Children who would have been enemies under the old system played together as friends. On Kepler 7b, Danny Reyes watched the news feeds with Maria Santos at his side. His energy technology had spread to every corner of the galaxy now. Beings who had once depended on the elder races for their survival were now free to chart their own course. Danny said, "When I started working on that project, I thought the best case was maybe getting a better job somewhere warmer. And instead, you helped change the galaxy." "Humans," Danny replied with a shrug. "We are funny that way." Commander Lisa Grant and her first officer Kevin Park returned to the Endeavor for the journey home. As the ship pulled away from the station, Lisa looked back at the assembled fleets of dozens of species, all working together for the first time in history. "Do you think it will last?" Kevin asked. "Nothing lasts forever," Lisa replied. "But that is okay. What matters is that we try. What matters is that we keep reaching for something better, even when it seems impossible. That is what humanity has always done. It is what we taught the rest of the galaxy to do." The Endeavor jumped too faster than light speed, leaving the station behind. But the changes they had helped create would continue long after they were gone, in the end. The Galactic Council had been right about one thing. Humanity was a threat to the existing order. But the order they threatened was one of stagnation and fear. What they brought instead was chaos, yes, but also creativity. Disruption, but also hope. Change, but also growth. The Council had voted to outlaw humanity. By the time they made that decision, it was already too late. Not because humanity was too powerful to stop, but because the idea of humanity, the stubborn and irrational belief that tomorrow could be better than today, had already taken root in hearts across the galaxy, and that was something no vote could ever contain. The stars shone on, as they always had. But now they shone on a galaxy that was finally learning to hope.